have you been involved in a project or program and looked at yourself in the mirror in the morning and gone, I don't know what it is, but I just can't get it started? All the resources are in place, all the stakeholders in the room, you've got the green light, but you just can't seem to get it mobilized. Hi, my name is Carl Llewellyn. I'm going to talk to you about something we've developed at Pathfinder, which we call Program Kickstart, a 3-step program to help you identify when a program is suffering from lack of mobilization, how to get it started, and how to maintain that momentum in the program. It's going to take about 15 minutes. I'm going to use one of those minutes to tell you a little bit about Pathfinder first. At Pathfinder, we describe ourselves as consultants in management. We work with the senior teams in large organisations across Ireland and the UK, supporting them to realise their business objectives. We do this by improving the resource capabilities of the individuals in the organisation, helping them to deliver more for their customers. Primarily in strategy, change and execution, constantly looking at making sure the business is best digitally prepared for their future. With clients across our markets in finance, retail, agri, utility, and hospitality. Now, that's the 1 minute on Pathfinder. I'm going to hand over to Paul Fegan now, who's going to take you through Program Kickstart.
Thank you, Carl, and thank you all for watching this short presentation. I hope you'll get a couple of nuggets you can take back with you to your day job. Program Kickstart is all about mobilising a program to give it the best possible chance of success. We don't say that a slow starting program is doomed, nor indeed are we saying that Program Kickstart will guarantee you success, but we do adhere to the maximum coined over 2,500 years ago by Aristotle when he said, "Well begun is half done." So how do you recognise that you may need some help kickstarting your programs? In our experience, there are a number of things to look out for. These of course may vary across organisations, but I hope you might recognise some of them. Oh, and by the way, I'm not going to talk about what we call the hygiene factors here. Things like completed risk registers, budgets and so on. These are important and we do cover them as part of any Kickstart assignment, but today I want to cover some of the more intangible aspects, some of the differentiators, if you like, that we bring to this area. First up is declaration but no action. If you know your World War II history, the first 6 months of the war, while Germany invaded Poland and built up its forces to invade Western Europe, not a shot was fired in anger by the Allies. Britain and France relied on propaganda and tough talk in their respective parliaments, with actually little or no action on the ground. This became known as the phony war, and we see examples of phony programs all too often in clients where senior declarations fail to translate into action on the ground. We are currently kickstarting a cost reduction program at a large Irish multinational. Despite the CEO level declarations and commitments to this work in the current 2015 plans, 3 months after the official start date, we were asked in to mobilise the programme, as in the eyes of the COO at least, it was still on the starting blocks. Similar, but perhaps even more insidious, is action but no progress. In this scenario, there is lots of action, but it's not directed to delivering value. This is the spinning wheels scenario. Lots of smoke and noise, but limited forward progress. Or worse still, we are actually sitting doing donuts in the car park when we should be out on the open road heading towards our objectives. At a large UK client, we were asked by the CFO to help support his finance programme. Lots of consultants were on site, various work streams had been established, and there was lots of steering reports to read and committee meetings for the CFO to attend, but in his view there was no traction towards his goals, and he asked us to remobilise the programme to set it on the right track. Waiting for perfection is a trap we can all fall into sometimes. It manifests itself in statements such as, We are waiting for Fred or Jane or whomever to come free and join the project, or we need head office or some other department to make a decision or do something. These dependencies are often valid, but they shouldn't affect mobilisation. And we'll talk later how by managing these, by aligning these various priorities and dependencies with the overall programme objective and basically getting started, this is the way to go. Finally, the idea of overlapping programs and moving resources from one program to the other depending on the phase of the project is taught in all PM cases and textbooks. And this idea of ramp up, ramp down is a very valid management technique, provided of course you have accurate and up-to-date plans and transparent resource allocations. Typically what we find is when programs are mobilised with this as a central core though, they tend to suffer, as in-flight projects often hold on to staff longer than planned. And in our view, the finishing project will always trump the starting project in terms of resources. And this approach can only actually be challenged by formal mobilisation phase, which is what we're trying to do with Programme Kickstart. So with this formal mobilisation phase, where do you start? While plans and budgets are important, at Pathfinder this is not our starting point. We apply a very specific lens to all programs and projects, describing them not as a series of tasks, but as a network of commitments individuals have made to each other, and the ongoing conversations required to keep these commitments coordinated. For mobilisation, for Kickstart, the first place we start is with the overall programme level commitment. Who are the key players? What stage is the conversation at? And where is the value proposition? In my UK example earlier, the action but no progress spinning wheels example, the CFO was the customer, but he had no single performer taking care of overall delivery responsibility. Some of the performers, the consultants, had moved straight to execution phase or fulfillment without fully understanding the value proposition, where others were actually stuck back at negotiation phase. As part of Kickstart, we reset the conversation to make sure everyone was clear on the value to be delivered. And we also changed the governance slightly so its responsibilities were clear for overall delivery. This provided the traction to stop the spinning wheels and get the programme motoring. In our declaration but no progress example, the customer or CEO had made a declaration and had stated some value. There was a form of request made to his senior team, but actually what had happened was there was no negotiation phase onto what commitment was possible and what individuals were prepared to offer or bring to the programme. When this phase is missing, what we tend to find is the fulfillment or execution phase is severely impacted and progress is not satisfactory. What we did here was we reset the conversation back to the negotiation point and with focus on individuals signing up to deliver value for the COO. So this model is central to how we mobilise projects. And once the overall commitment is in place, or at least clarified to some degree, the next step is to translate this overall ambition into a network of promises that the team can relate to and own. Again, we overlay this onto traditional roles, but at this stage what we're actually looking for is some of the unspoken commitments that need to be identified at this stage. First up is who has clarity on what the future needs to look like. In 5 months or 5 years' time, or whatever, how are we going to be operating? This is the visionary, and it's his or her role to keep the team focused on the important changes that have to be delivered. Who can answer the value question and present facts and savings or benefits or whatever in terms of the business case? Who will keep us grounded in the overall investment? This is the investor and is usually a delegate of the sponsor and keeps the focus in the team on the business return. In terms of the nuts and bolts, new procedures, operating processes, or even technical design, who in the team is committing to produce an elegant and maintainable solution? This is the designer, and his or her promise is rooted in getting a solution that works. And finally, who will make sure the team remains well coordinated and focused on the value that has to be delivered? And who will manage the breakdowns that will inevitably occur as the project or program progresses and keeps the team back on track? This is the execution role, or the executor, and again we would argue key to the mobilisation of the project. The first two roles we typically see staffed from the client in terms of subject matter expertise, where roles 3 and 4 can be either client sourced, or in some cases Pathfinder or other third parties can source the designer and the executor. In our spinning wheels, for example, there was no execution person. We had a number of MS project planners who saw their role as creating plans, regardless of how realistic they were or how they coordinated or brought the team together. In our declaration but no action, we are still looking for our visionary, for example. And in fact, we are meeting resistance from the SMEs assigned because they can't imagine a future without them in it doing the same roles that they're currently doing. So we're still looking for the visionaries there. I'm sure you've all been on projects, as I have, where you have design people who have spoken their role as, will you tell me what you want and I will document it. We want to shift all these roles, all these views of work, to one where the company ambition resonates with the individual and with the personal motivation of each person on the team, where people are inspired, encouraged to take personal responsibility to help deliver not a series of artifacts, but their own part of a bigger program delivering the overall value proposition for the company. So once the overall promise is clear and we've lined up the right people to deliver the individual parts of that promise, we can have our mobilisation meeting. As the heading here suggests, the focus of this mobilisation meeting is really to set some early deadlines, and we'll come to that in a moment. Before we get there though, there are a couple of things that are critical to a successful mobilisation meeting. The first is lessons learned, or as we prefer to call them, lessons applied. Have you brought learnings from similar programs or projects into the team? Companies often accept weeks and months of slippage or under delivery on programs, but often will not invest 1 or 2 days to make sure they have reviewed and, more importantly, applied the lessons learned in other programs to this current assignment. We can't properly kickstart a program of work without applying lessons, either from ourselves as Pathfinder, bringing outside experience to bear, and more importantly, internal programs and the lessons you have learned from delivering those must be applied as part of the mobilisation meeting. The other element is to elicit reasons for success and failure. What I mean here is ask the team to project forward to the end of the project or program. This project is now a case study for your company in how to run a successful project. Ask the team why that would be the case. Why, if this project is going to be up there as a case study, why or what happened to make it such. You may find that nobody says, oh, it's more detailed plans or longer risk registers or the budget being split out in separate or different ways. You tend to hear things like better communication, more engagement with the sponsor and the business teams, chance to iterate, to fail and redo. And the application of these type of ideas not only ensures buy-in and engagement from your team, but I would argue these are the types of ideas that actually allow your project to be mobilised successfully and get off on the right foot. Once these two elements are in place, Where we go next is to set early deadlines, deadline-inspired success, to get the project up and running and mobilised correctly. Now, this isn't just about building momentum and getting the team working hard from the start. For us, this is all about taking an early temperature check back with our customer. So rather than disappearing off for 3 months or longer even on some programs, we force early deadlines to make sure we're closing back out the conversation with the customer, closing the loop back, checking that the value proposition is still valid, checking that the negotiation that we did at the earlier stage is still valid, and checking that we are still on the right track. The idea of early deadlines, as I say, while it does help build momentum, is really focused on closing the loop with the customer and making sure that the value proposition remains front and centre of our programme, especially in the early days of mobilisation. So in summary, and to recap, and it's a phrase I actually use a lot and really resonates with me, is that people forget that people deliver projects. What we're trying to do here is get the right people aligned with the overall ambition of the company. So first up, understand what you want to achieve in terms of the conversation between customer and supplier and the value that's trying to be delivered. Get the right people on board. Align their personal ambitions and roles with the value you are trying to deliver. In our example, we moved away from the traditional job titles: investors, designers, executors. That'll allow you to drive out a network of commitments. Once that's in place, get out of the way and let them do their jobs. And hopefully at that stage, by following these few tips, your project will be well mobilised, up and running, and as I say, with every chance of a successful outcome. So thank you all for listening, and as I said at the top of the presentation, I hope you got 1 or 2 little nuggets of information you can bring back to your day job and hopefully kickstart your programs a little bit more effectively or efficiently. As I say, we're not saying it's going to guarantee success, but well begun is half done. So thanks again, and I'll hand you back to Carl, who'll close out the presentation. Thanks.
Well, any questions or comments? We'd love to hear them. Please email us using our first name, last name at pathfinder.ie. Of course, these presentations you've heard from Lawrence Visse, Paul Fegan, and myself, Carl Llewellyn. Find out more about us and the rest of the senior team at Pathfinder at our web address pathfinder.ie/about-us/team. While you're there, please take a look at our case studies of our work with clients across our range of programs at pathfinder.ie, our work. Alternatively, please feel free to call us. We'd love to hear from you at either our Dublin or Edinburgh office to the number displayed on screen, or also available on our website. Call us and tell us about the challenges and programs, exciting plans that you have for your future. Thank you.